What if I told you that South Africa has a special police unit and the only job of that unit is to investigate the supernatural and crimes associated with the supernatural? This is not an episode of Supernatural. Sam and Dean are not going to become rolling in the black Impala. This is an actual fact. This is the occult unit of South Africa, now rebranded as the Occult-Related Crimes Unit, that has operating since 1992, perhaps some say even before then. Today on African X-Files, we are peeling away the layers that surround this mysterious unit, its origins, its cases, and the controversies that have followed it for decades. So grab a seat, maybe keep a salt shaker handy. You'll want protection just in case. This story begins with the founder of the unit, Dr. Colonel Kobus Jonker, known as Donker Jonker. That was the nickname that he was given, which basically means dark, and his surname, so Dark Jonker. And he was a detective in the murder and robbery unit in the Eastern Cape. I believe that he was perfectly associated with the Eastern Cape to head this unit because a lot of occult crimes, they happen in the Eastern Cape. I come from the Eastern Cape. I grew up there. Something about the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, it's so very hauntingly beautiful. But there is also something about the Eastern Cape. I don't know what it is, but it is a place of deep spirituality. There are some places where you go and it just feels as though, you are perhaps entering another realm. And he was working the murdery and robbery unit. We know that the police officers that work this unit, that they see the worst of the worst. And in 1992, he established the occult unit, but some reports indicate that this unit might have been working already from the 80s. This was aimed to investigate crimes related to witchcraft, Satanism, and other occult practices. Belief was that these crimes weren't just criminal, they were supernaturally motivated in nature. We know that by 2000, Donker Jonker had retired and Colonel Attie Lambrecht has taken over. Lambrecht would go on to be the head of the unit for 2 decades, guiding it through controversies, going underground with it at some stage, constitutional debates, and the growing backlog of the occult case. There have been a lot of rumors that this unit was disbanded, but we know that it was never officially disbanded. It instead went underground due to the pressure of human rights groups and non-harmful occult organizations, South Africa's Pagan Right Association. The unit's very existence has been controversial. Initially, detectives, they have a very strict protocol of who can be accepted into the unit. You have to be of a Christian faith. You have to have a very strong support system around you. You have to undergo psychological tests, and you also have to not be interested in the occult. They have special tests that are designed to make sure that you are not interested in the occult because they don't want you coming into the unit for the wrong reason. The policing of the occult in South Africa didn't start with the Occult-Related Crimes Unit. We know that South Africa has a long history with witchcraft, going back to the colonial past. People from Europe brought into South Africa with them. We know that the Cape Colony was guided by a rule on England in the 1735 Witchcraft Act in Britain, which suppressed the act of witchcraft and was later amended in 1895 to become the Witchcraft Suppression Act of the Cape Colony. And then at 1957, this act was altered again, the Witchcraft Suppression Act 3, which still governs occult-related crimes today. We know that with our new constitution, South Africa's new constitution, which I do believe is one of the best in the world, there have been certain provisions that have been made to the point where if you are protected for your freedom of religion, you have the right to believe in whatever you want to believe. But the problem comes in when religion is used as a motive to commit a crime. Satanism itself is not a crime. Witchcraft is not a crime. But if someone is hurt in order to contribute to a deity, irrespective of beliefs, that's when the occult unit comes to interfere. So what exactly does an occult-related crime look like? Well, I'm going to go through the categories. There are 4, and the first is psychic witchcraft, also known as black magic, and it's only considered criminal if you can prove proven harm. Evidence can include, for example, emails threatening harm, letters threatening harm, dolls made with the victim's hair, and practitioners include traditional witches, which are not sangomas. Sangomas are healers. These traditional witches are something else, as well as sorcerers and familiars. So we know that in some South African cultures, you have this emergence of witches and their familiars. They live in a realm of both the living, the human realm, and the animal realm. Once the witch has tamed the familiar, you get different types, and these different types of familiars can be used to carry out the witch's wishes in many different ways. For example, you have the lightning bird, which can harm by sitting on the chest of a person. You have the tukoloshi, which is a dwarf-like creature, which causes infertility by SAing victims, specifically female victims, while they sleep. Then you have the baboon, which destroys livestock, the cat, which kills infants, and the dukwana, also known as the living dead, otherwise known as zombies, which are used for manual labor. The use of herbs can also be used to summon spirits, which are believed to possess victims. Now we have to go on to the second category of occult crime, which is witch hunting, which is in essence an anti-occult crime. Because, for examples, sometimes communities take the law into their own hands, and this results in killings. Between 1985 and 1995, the Ritualistic Commission documented 312 witchcraft-related killings in the northern province of South Africa. And this is because what happens is that whenever there is a failure of crops, or for example, if all the livestock die, then witchcraft is usually to blame. So belief systems are often framed on a social balance. Wealth gained by one comes from another's expense, and life force is considered tangible. So, for example, someone could eat your energy to cause an illness or a death. And when a whole community is stricken by a series of unfortunate events, then, for example, a witch is suspected, and this witch, they either have to come forward and name themselves, or the community sometimes names them. And during the act of punishing the witch, for example, sometimes the witches are killed, such as in the Ritualistic Commission, which documented those 112 witchcraft-related killings that occurred before. A lot of them occurred just before and after 1994. And basically, Occult Unit investigates the killing of these supposed witches. Now, the third thing is something that has made international headlines, and that is muti murders. Now, we are familiar with the case of Jocelyn Smith, I'm sure you are, who was sold for, I believe it was her beautiful eyes. And the thing about muti killings is probably they are estimated to be about 300 cases per a year, and these are highly organized organizations that carry it out. It often goes from families. I'm told it comes in a bloodline. So if you are raised by people who do muti slayings, then you are trained to become a muti slayer. The death of Likona Fosse, in my own opinion, was linked to muti killing. It is a currently unsolved cold case in Roodepoort. And the thing about muti killings is that victims are killed alive in order to harvest body parts for magic potions or muti. Muti means medicine. And the organs that are taken include the head, the heart, the genitals, the breasts, the hands, and each is believed to have a specific spiritual power. Sometimes this crime can also be considered ritualistic, although it has its own category, because it is believed that when you remove the living body parts from a person, it informs the ancestors that a crime has been committed and that a sacrifice is happening, and the screams will alert the ancestors. And there could be a ritualistic component in this, but mostly muti killings are classified as muti murders. Organs that are harvested from a person who is still alive will essentially be more powerful. The medicine, the muti, will be stronger, and there are different organs for different things. For example, if you want to attract more women to your business, then you use a breast you incorporate a breast into the muti or the medicine because it has a lot of fat, which is considered lucky. Male body parts are removed for virility, to encourage virility and strength. Blood is considered very powerful, and that is also removed. The atlas bone is also really important with muti killings because it believes to link the spiritual and the physical realm together because it runs through the circulatory system and the nervous system. The motive behind taking hands is also just to attract more people to your business, shaking hands, making deals, as well as the taking of money from customers. Fat taken from the stomach and the kidneys is considered lucky and is used to attract luck into your life. And we know that urine and sperm are also considered to bring luck. If you have the skull, it protects members of one tribe from another tribe. Usually a skull is taken from an enemy tribe and buried in your tribe's, for example's, land to protect your land. Brains may be used to improve intelligence, and we know eyes also may be used to help clairvoyance, to help you see far into the future and make the right decisions. An Adam's apple is believed to silence a witness who is perhaps going to testify against you in a trial or something along those lines. So these occult crimes are normally treated as general crimes by the justice system, but the way that they are investigated requires the skills of the occult unit. Now, the one thing that distinguishes muti killings from Western murders or ritualistic murders is that there is no ritualistic act to the killing. We know, for example, for some of the Satanic practices, you have to set up the altar in the 13 steps. For example, these are of no ritualistic value. The only purpose is to remove the body parts while the person is alive in order to harvest their organs so that it could be made into muti or medicine. Now, the fourth one is ritualistic killings, which are pure sacrificial acts, sometimes tied to Satanism, voodoo, or other traditional African belief systems. And for example, Western Satanism can be put into ritualistic killings, as well as some historical killings. For example, the sacrifice of Venda virgins to the crocodiles in the Funzuzi Lake. And we also know of historical cases where children had been thrown into the whirlpools of Tashingo in order to appease the ancestors and protect crops. What is Satanism? So Satanism is the belief in an entity known as Satan from the Bible. It is that angel that was once God's favorite that has now fallen and became the leader of hell. If you watch a lot of Supernatural like I do, then you have a pretty good idea. But for some, Satan is not necessarily a monster, but it is a symbol. He is a symbol of ultimate freedom. But what if I told you that not all Satanists are criminals, and that some of the most powerful people in your community, even your politicians, could be related to satanic rings? And this is all stuff that I've gotten out of academic papers. I have sources for all of this. This is not something out of a weird horror movie. This is based in people who have escaped the satanic cult and the stories that they have to tell us. For example, a lot of Satanists, they believe in living a life that for your greatest pleasure, despite the morals that come with it. They reject moral restrictions and they seek power, wealth, and money. And they want to live their life on their own terms. But here's what's often misunderstood. Not all Satanists commit crimes. Some are just deeply philosophical, more interested in rebellion and self-worship than in violence and bloodshed. And in South Africa, Satanism is protected in our constitution. So being a Satanist does not make you a criminal. Now I'm going to go through the various groups of Satanists. So the first group is the religious Satanists. These are formal members of the Church of Satan and the Temple of Set, founded by Anthony LaVey in the 1960s. And they don't actually believe in a horned devil living underground. They see Satan as more of a metaphor of personal empowerment. Some may perform symbolic rituals, send hexes and curses, but they have no interest in criminal activity, and this is not considered an occult crime. And the South Africa Occult Unit is just simply not interested in this group of Satanists, because what they do, while dark and weird sometimes, isn't illegal. Now here's where things turn sinister. We're going to deal with the second group, which is known as intergenerational Satanists. They are said to operate like secret societies, passed down through from families through multiple generations. They are often very wealthy, influential people, and they are deeply hidden within our society. Politicians, policemen, businessmen, they're alleged to have connections into all reaches of power in the community. And they indoctrinate their children, their grandchildren from birth, teaching them the rituals and loyalty to the Dark Order. Now, these groups are linked to criminal acts, mainly animal and human sacrifices, SA of minors, as well as ritualistic killings. And the occult unit has identified a hierarchy with regard to these networks. Hierarchy, much like churches where you have different members, you have members, and then, for example, you may have ushers and deacons, and then you have, for example, churches like the Domini and stuff like that. They also, or the Reverend, they also have a hierarchy. So at the top sits a high priest or priestess, often running what looks like a church, but they call it a circle. Within Satanist's own community, the Brothers of the Ram is perhaps the most scary organization. They are like at the top, and they are almost like the Satanic secret police. They make sure that no one comes and spills the tea on the rituals, and that if you have been speaking to people who are not Satanists and telling them about what Satanists do, then apparently they get rid of you. That's right. And they are financed by the elite, and no one talks, and they make sure that everyone has their finances to do whatever they basically want to do, right? And that all the circles are financed correctly in order to carry out their deeds. Now, another organization, the Order of Darkness, they infiltrate real churches. They pose in those churches, they try and get the pastors or the reverends to do bad things in order to corrupt the community and turn the congregations against Christianity. And then finally, you have the Sons of Satan, which are just your run-of-the-mill Satanists. They basically at the bottom of the hierarchy, and the way that they get up further into the hierarchy is to participate in ritual murder and prove themselves by climbing the rank. You might even pass one of them in your own community, and you might never know. After that category of Satanists, we have a different type of category, and these are loner Satanists. Now, these are people that identify as Satanists, but do not necessarily perform the correct rituals. They perform perhaps personal rituals, and they are basically known for committing petty crime, and occasionally they blame Satanism for violent acts that are actually rooted in other things such as mental illness or rage, not religion. One example is Mone Haramsa. Perhaps I'll cover the story one day on this channel, otherwise known as the samurai sword killer. It's that boy who brought a katana to school and killed a fellow student, and he blamed it on Satanism. But when the occult unit investigated, they found that he didn't have an altar, he didn't have any of the religious paraphernalia. He just basically wanted that power that he thought that Satanism would bring him. And another thing that we have is the last category is the youth subculture of Satanism, which these are mostly rebellious teenagers. They are drawn in by the imagery of power, skulls, and rebellion, and they sometimes commit petty crimes by making pentagrams with graffiti, and sometimes they will burn candles and start fires, but most of them grow out of it once the shock factor fades. But for a few, they open doors that they cannot close. And some South African schools have reported satanic clubs where students share music, symbols, or even minor animal sacrifices. For most part, it's just rebellion. For others, it's initiation. But harming an animal, in my opinion, is really horrible and terrible. The only group that the occult unit is interested in is the second group I mentioned, which is those intergenerational Satanists. And what exactly happens in a satanic ritual? Well, according to former investigators and recovered victims, many ceremonies, they involve 13 steps because 13 is considered an unlucky number, and they begin with the building of an altar, and there's different things that happen until the altar is completed. and we know that a pentagram is drawn, and the chanting of words basically to bring about the ritualistic. And we know from this from one real case near Polokwane, police found an empty water reservoir and there was a large pentagram drawn inside, surrounded by burnt material and animal remains. You could kind of see where all the candles went. They mostly use red or black candles. And there's often blood drinking, either from a human or animal sacrifice, because they believe that blood is the life force. And drinking it while it's still warm from the human or the animal allows you to absorb the victim's energy, becoming more powerful. And there is often a sexual component as well in this case, which might result in multiple sex acts. But these rituals are designed to desensitize members, to make them feel as though they are above morality, above law, and above humanity itself. Now we're going to get into what the darkest part of this whole thing is, which is called Satanic Ritual Abuse, and SRA. Now children, some young as 5 years old, this is trigger warning for if you are sensitive to SA or grape, have reported being SA'd or even married off to adult cult members as well as to Satan. And one survivor told her captors that they had allegedly made her pregnant, and then they forced her to unalive the child or the fetus, and then they ate it during a ceremony. And this was in an academic paper. Now it is horrifying, and although extremely rare, these cases leave scars for a lifetime. The occult unit has spent decades separating truth from hysteria, but also documenting the undeniable horrors that cannot be explained away by fantasy. Now, have you ever wondered why some crimes seem to straddle law and legend? That is the line that the Occult-Related Crime Unit walks. The 1980s and the 1990s were a turbulent time in South Africa amid political upheaval. There was a moral panic over Satanism, particularly among the young white youth. This coincided with heavy metal music, and newspapers published 90 to 100 articles a year on Satanism from 1989 to 1992. And we know that the Occult-Related Crimes Unit initially focused on satanic crimes, often measuring occult indicators by Western Christian moral standards. For example, there was a whole list that was provided. Perhaps I'll read the list one day, because I would check yes to a lot of those things when I was a child. They include, for example, does your child dye their hair black? Do they listen to heavy metal? Do they have depression or interest in computers? As well as you drape your hair across your eyes? So yes, in some cases, being emo could have gotten you flagged by the occult police. But after 1994, the unit had to adapt to South Africa's new constitution, respecting freedom of religion while policing only harmful acts. So how does someone become an occult detective? Well, recruited detectives come from already elite units such as the Hawks, or Psychology Investigative Section, and we know that the Occult-Related Crime Unit provides specialized top-up training that is registered with the SAQA, and this training covers the forensic analysis of crime scenes, legal frameworks over harmful practices, cultural awareness including African cosmology, and debriefing and psychological support for the officers, because this occult unit has one of the highest dropout rates in the world. There's also a big drive towards faith and spirituality. You have to be a Christian in order to join this unit, and some detectives, they are expected to use their faith or spirituality to protect them from investigating these dangerous occult crimes. Others rely on, you also have to have a strong family and psychological support system. This unit is so challenging that 50% quit after a year, after even only witnessing things that they never knew existed. Now, you're going to say to me, Carrie, this is strange that you have to be a Christian in order to join this unit. But the unit has the belief systems are double-edged sword in the occult-related crime units. We know that, for example, there is a bias risk. So investigators must not let personal fear cloud their faith or their judgment. And we know that people who are interested in the occult are specifically screened out of this unit. This unit wants people who do not have an interest in the occult. And also in protection, belief in spirits or personal faith can psychologically protect others from intimidation and trauma. So even today, in some rural police areas in South Africa, rural police officers may refuse to investigate occult cases due to the fear of community pressure or due to their own fear of the occult. And this is often when the occult-related unit steps in to support, to train, and to supervise investigation, ensuring that cultural sensitivities and legal obligations are balanced. Some officers even act as sangomas, which are traditional healers themselves, and these are the good traditional healers, bridging the spiritual and investigative worlds, a unique example of diviner detectives. Now, South Africa occult crimes aren't isolated. Internationally, the occult unit has been consulted for the Adam case in London. Perhaps we'll cover it one day on this channel. This occurred in London in 2011 when an African boy's torso was found in the Thames River. It had been linked to South Africa muti murder, as well as combined with Nigerian voodoo beliefs. And collaboration exists between Scotland Yard, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Uganda, sharing insights globally into occult-related crimes. And even American cult cops have similar units influenced evangelical Christianity. Globally, the challenge remains, how do you police belief without a bias? Now, the Orco's history is rife with controversy. We know that, first of all, what I spoke about is the Christian-only recruitment policy, as well as the moral panic and harmful practices as criminal. Media nicknames like devil hunters and vampire investigations have not helped with them, and they often shy away from the press because of this. And we also know that there are a bunch of human rights debates that have occurred. Colonel Lambrecht and his team have redefined the occult-related crimes unit. It is focused solely on harmful crimes, not belief systems, and it engages with traditional healers, the SAPRA, and local communities. So the new redefined unit tries to work with the communities and not against them when solving these crimes. And the occult-related crimes unit proves only one thing. The occult-related crime unit proves one thing. Occult crime policing is more about law and social understanding than magic.